simple way to plug the gap. I read various news articles that come up all the time. And quite recently, something came up. Now, I don't care if it's in the Telegraph, the Guardian, Independent, the Daily Mail. If it's got a good idea, or they've used a professor, an academic in the field to create the article, then you can gain a lot of information from it. You can gain a lot of insight in it. And there was one, and I'm trying to find the start of it because I know I've got to start somewhere. It was Daniela Gabor. She is a... Where's it gone? Because I screenshotted it because you know how the articles online vanish. Is a professor of economics and macrofinance at UWE Bristol. And, okay, it was in the Guardian. Don't judge me. But she kind of nailed an issue. Back in the 70s, there was wage spirals. And wage spiral is an irritating term that allows large corporate entities, businesses as a whole really, to get around passing on increased operating costs to you so that they don't have to decrease their profits, shareholder dividends and stuff like that. For example, at the moment, at time of recording this, you've got that big stuff in the paper about BP's record profits, yeah, and everyone's pissed off about it. Well, the problem is that capitalism is fine if it's governed. If you decide to remove governments, and the monetary policy about 40 years ago, it was depoliticize, the economy style thing. So put it back in the bank's control, the central bank's control, and then they'll be able to manage a relatively smooth interest rate. Keep inflation bubbling along, interest rates relatively level, economic growth is good, yada yada yada. The problem is that when you start doing stuff like that, remember where your money is. Okay? First and foremost, let's get away from what she's saying for a second, but remember that money technically doesn't exist. Everybody can go, yeah, it does. I've got like 10, I've got 5. Read it. Bank of England promises to pay the bearer on demand the sum of. Have you ever walked into the Bank of England and demanded the sum of £10? No. Never done it. Nobody ever has. Not even a business has done it. Eh? You believe that the money you earn is yours because you spend it on whatever you want. Well, it's loaned to you, yes. It's not a fucking loan. Oh, I ain't paying it back, aren't you? Okay, fair enough. So, the business you work for gives you money. Yeah. And what do you do with that money? We'll give it back to the business to buy products. Where does a business store its money? In a bank. Where do you store your money? In a bank. What do banks do with that money? Lend it out to generate more money in a debt-driven economy. So who has the money? The banks. So when you give control of an economic society, the society's economy, and I know this is a really dumbed down way of looking at it, I understand. You're basically just telling the bank, right, well, there's all the money. And you can come up with any theory you want then. 50% of the wealth of the country is owned by 1%, and 50% is spread between everybody else. No, the money's in the fucking banks. You've got some IOUs in your pocket, but those IOUs are attached to what? Money where? In a bank. And until you redeem it, which you never do, you give it to a shop. Yeah? Who then runs it in a bank. That then gives it back to you to give it to a fucking shop. You never actually walk into the Bank of England and go, give me my fucking money, do you? You basically, what you do is you depoliticising economic stability is one of the dumbest things ever. Because you allow companies to then do something like a few months ago, Morrison's, obviously we all, dangers of wage spiral and everything. There was this headline about Morrison's. And it struck me as, oh my God, society's fucking falling for it. Again, because of divide and conquer. It's you believe in Brexit, you don't believe in Brexit. You believe in IR35 changes in legislation, you don't believe in it. You separate in the country, now you can argue whatever the fuck you want. You argue it agrees with you argue it agrees with you, nobody really thinks about it. Well, wages went up in pretty much across most sectors. Again, wage competition, oh fuck, it works. Anyway, wage competition suddenly appeared after IR35, not after Brexit in January, didn't happen until after April when IR35 changes came in. Right, calm the fuck down. Now, wage competition appeared. Wages went up. In real terms, from the March of that year to now, so not even a year later, in real terms, from overtime, wage increases, I went up £11,000 a year. Now, I'm paying tax on £11,000 a year, extra that I wasn't earning a year ago, for argument's sake, if I'd have been full-time a year ago. Now do you see where the plug in the gap comes from? Right, bear with me here, you're starting to fucking see it, keep it in your mind. Right? Now, Morrison's came out a few months ago, headlines. Morrison's are going to have to increase prices on shelf prices on all of their products. Because, again, before IR35 or before Brexit, depending on what argument you follow, okay, whatever, don't give a fuck, divide and conquer, who gives a shit. 6 months, right? Morrison's posted profits of around, I think it was 162 million before large reinvestment and stuff like that. But profits of, 162 million. 6 months afterwards, they posted profits of 105 million. And now they're going to have to put their shelf prices up. Why? They're still posting a fucking profit of 105 million. They decrease the gap between the rich and the poor through wage increases, right, by nearly 60 million. Right? Tax doesn't fucking do that. That's why all the millionaires and billionaires are writing letters going, we demand to be taxed more, because they don't fucking pay it in the first place. Anyway, this has turned into a bit of a rant now, isn't it? Yay! Anyway, you've had to wait 3 fucking parts for this. Anyway. So there you go, right? You literally saw it. It happened in front of your fucking eyes. Now all of a sudden, oh, it's fucking wage spirals. Oh, it's dangerous. Who's telling you that? The banks. The Bank of England. And don't they have all the money? And the Bank of England has recently, at time of recording, a few days ago in actual fact, come out and said, don't ask for large pay increases. Not that you can't have a pay increase, just don't ask for inflation busting ones, because the wage spiral. Right, okay, in the 70s, right, the wage spiral was happening in such a degree, after we de-governed the fucking economy, that we ended up at like 26 and 29%. Inflation and, wage increases and things. Yeah, that's a fucking spiral. 5 and 7%, nowhere fucking near it. Now, in this, what do you think? Right, when central banks call for workers to yet again shoulder the pain, their role as guardians of the distributional status quo, the struggle over the distribution of national income between labour and capital, becomes clear for everyone to see. It is a misjudged call, tearing off the veil of carefully curated neutrality and showing whose interests the bank really protects. Bailey's reasoning is clear. The 1970s left central banks scared of the prospect of wage price spirals, when powerful unions obtained worker pay rises that kept pace with higher living costs, and in turn companies transferred those higher labour costs into higher prices, triggering renewed wage demands. COVID-related labour shortages, global supply bottlenecks and renewed appetite for striking threaten to reignite these cycles. But Bailey did not explain that wage price spirals only occur if firms dump wage increases into prices instead of simply reducing their profits. It was not, he implied, up to capital to moderate profit expectations to address inflation. Rather, workers must take another one for capital. Now, she carries on, and she starts talking again about what we had before, where you had bodies that looked into it and came up with solutions that were questioned, where government, where the nation questioned, does Morrison's really need that level of profit? I mean, it's still a decent profit, it's still a decent little pay for shareholders. Don't get me wrong, 105 billion is pretty good, you know. But what was it? The National Board for Prices, right? The failed wage policies of the 70s. The National Board for Prices and Incomes, created by Labour government in 65, which was dismantled by the Conservatives in 1970, offers a better starting point. In words of its chairman, Conservative Aubrey Jones, the MBPI sought to restrain both powerful employers and unions. There you go. Restraining power. Governing power. Remember, greed, power. Never underestimate the other person's greed, whether they're a union or whether they're an employer. Yeah? You've got to restrain it. I love this article. I was reading it. I was like, Jesus Christ, it's perfect. In more than 160 reports on various industries, public and private, it asked whether firms could absorb higher wage and other costs by lowering profits, particularly if those profits arose from excessive market power. Right? You see. And it's just brilliant. It's absolutely brilliantly well written and well thought out. And I know it's in the Guardian, whatever. It doesn't matter politically where it is. It's basically... I'm not going to read it word for word, okay? But it's basically summing up the reality of two different ways of controlling an economy. Yeah? If you allow the bank that holds all the fucking money to decide how much money it holds, you're fucked. It might work for a few years, a couple of decades, but ultimately you're fucked. Never underestimate the other person's greed, right? If, however, you monitor it, independent government bodies, yeah, disgusting government, hold on a minute, you know, look at society today, loads of people can't afford to heat their homes, but all those people who can't afford to heat their homes have to add the burden of stabilising the economy. But the company that provides the gas to your home is posting record profits. How the fuck does that work? No, people are going to say, oh, it's fucking capitalism. No, it's the way you control it. Like, communism isn't massively unfair if you look at those societies. Like, socialism doesn't end up with the people who know the government ministers and that don't live in the bigger houses, have the nicer vehicles and, you know, have a little bit more than the people in the high-rise grey buildings. You might be equal, you know, you might be considered human and equal in that respect, but, you know, you're a worker in Sector 7G, you're the person who owns the company that has Sector 7G. There is still a gap, and it is quite a ginormous one. In any way of governing, communism, fascism, socialism, capitalism, whatever, yeah, it's how you govern it. Yeah. Why does Morrison's need to increase prices? Oh, well, because, shareholders and shit. But you're still giving them a dividend. I mean, Jesus Christ, you're still paying your CEO like fucking 20 million a year plus bonuses. 105 million in 6 months is 210 million in a year. You're only paying your CEO less, around about 10% of it, and then bonuses on top. But again, what? What you've got to do is you've got to get, as I said a minute ago, keep it in your brain, you've got to get money into society's pockets so that the 20% tax rate, or whatever the tax rate is, that's right, gets more money. Think about this. What would generate more water? 60% of the overall volume of the River Thames, or 30% of the Atlantic fucking Ocean? Now, all of the money we know is in banks. And in order to tax that money, it's got to get into society, either into a business, corporation tax, or into your pocket, income tax. Yeah? But it ultimately goes back to the fucking bank. Right. Because even the HMRC hold their money in the fucking bank account. Now, okay, it's Her Majesty's account, but you know what I mean. But anyway, so you've got to tax it. Well, the Great Depression in 1920, now I'm going to brush over this, so anybody who knows economic history, please just understand I'm brushing over this. Alright, I do understand it's going to be a dumbed down version. The Great Depression of the 20s. Coming towards the kind of the end of it, it all happened, everything had collapsed, businesses had gone all over the place. The governments of the time realised that the people who had the money, the wealthy, were hoarding the money. They were too scared to let it go because of economic uncertainty. And so what ultimately happened was the governments gave workers support to unionise, gave them powers to come out on strike, industrial action, to get the money from the pockets up there down to them. Yeah? Significantly decreasing the gap, by the way, at the same time. Because when it gets into my pocket or your pocket, their pocket over there, whatever, we piss up the wall down the pub. We go down the chippy. Yeah? Buy another car, put some tyres on the car. Whatever. Gets into the economy. And when it comes down to us, it's got to be taxed on the way down. When we put tyres on the car, tax on the tyres. When we go to the chippy's got to pay corporation tax, business rates and stuff. And so on and so forth. And so you get the money back into the economy and wallop, you had the swinging 30s, didn't you? You had the real, because that's how it works. But at the moment, we have a bottleneck of all the money up there and no reason for it to come down to us. And now you've got all the people up there who've got all the money and are thinking, shit, society's waking up to this fucking, wage competition bollocks. We're losing money. Fuck, wage spirals. Oh, yeah, that's a good one, Bertie. That's a fucking good one, Bertie. Oh, Dave, how about this? Hold on. Oh, let's write a letter to demand we get taxed more. Yeah, but we don't pay tax, Mark. That's the fucking point. But society are too thick to realise that. Fucking good idea, that. Ta-da. Does that sound familiar? I'm just putting it out there. Again, it's a theory. It's a mild rant into a theory. Just putting it out there. I'm looking at history and how they restarted the economy after the Great Depression, giving workers rights to strike to get more money in their pockets. Yes, there's a few other steps, but it is, I'm condensing it here. Yeah? And what have you seen in the papers? Wage spiral is dangerous. Remember the 70s. Okay. Let's remember the tax rate in World War II that was 99% for the highest earners. War tax. And the 90% tax rate of the 60s for higher earners. The Beatles existed in that time. They made a huge amount of money. They shouldn't have done. Tax rate. Well, they kept it, didn't they? You read about it. They even fucking wrote a song about it, Taxman. Yeah? They kept it because of their accountant. You cannot decrease the gap between the rich and the poor by tax. Because the only cunt that pays it is you. You have to govern profitability. Yeah? Is it right that at a time of economic catastrophe, like global pandemic and whatever, that companies are posting insane profits and you're struggling to put the fucking heating on? No. Communism ain't gonna fucking solve that. Socialism ain't gonna fucking solve that. Fascism ain't gonna fucking solve that. Capitalism left the fuck alone isn't gonna solve it. And any other ism you can think of ain't gonna solve it. But governing the economy, whatever type it is, can. But again, as I've said before, I'm politically neutral. I know that's hard to take. I don't believe the way society politically operates is fit for purpose. I mean, it hasn't really changed a huge amount for, crikey, centuries really. I mean, definitely hasn't changed very much at all since the Victorian era. And we're in the 21st century. We're in a debt-driven society. We're not attached to gold or anything fucking tangible anymore. So you've got to balance it. You've got to govern it. Yeah? You can't do anything about a share price of a company. That's determined by what you're willing to pay to own a part of that company. Okay, there's nothing you can do there. That's always going to give you a skewed look at the gap between the wealth, the rich and the poor. Elon Musk has proved this repeatedly by saying, so you want me to pay tax, do you? Right, okay, I'll have to sell some shares and then I'll pay tax on that. It's a pathetically tiny amount of money that he's paid in tax compared to his share value, but he proved the point. Yeah, he's not worth it until he liquidates those shares. And then he only pays tax on what he fucking liquidates. Yeah? That's how it works. So you can't really do anything about that, but you can decrease profitability. In doing that, you decrease what somebody values a share at, you decrease the value of the shares, you decrease the gap that way. You can't fucking tax it shut. It doesn't work. You've just lived through fucking 40 years of trying to. Yeah? Amazon, not that long ago, what, 2 years ago, something like that, there was the online the 2% increase, the 2% tax brought in for Amazon because they weren't paying any tax on online orders or whatever. I forgot the bloody word. Transactions. That's the one. What did they do? They increased the prices to all the people who sell on Amazon by 2%. Why do you think wealthy people are falling over themselves begging to be taxed more? Well, they don't pay tax, do they? So increasing 0%, increasing tax 10 or 15% on zero, you're still going to generate the same amount of fucking revenue, but it makes them look good and it keeps you guessing. Wage buzz, wage buzz, wage buzz. Again, greed of the unions versus greed of the employer. So you've got to govern greed. And unfortunately, looking at our government, Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, whoever, they've all got vested interests. And everyone's like, well, you can't be politically neutral. You've got to be a neo-lib con, or you've got to be a Labourist, or you've got to be... Well, no. I don't believe that the way we politically manage ourselves is fit for purpose. We need to re-engineer the system, and it'll take a heck of a fucking lot. It won't be done in 5 years or something, but nobody's really thinking about it. Nobody's, oh well, you're overthinking it. No, that's the difference. I'm thinking about it, you're not. Therefore, any kind of thought above fuck all is overthinking it. You want to decrease the gap between the rich and the poor. It turns out you've tried fucking everything except increasing wages. Last year, wages increased a heck of a lot. The gap between the rich and the poor sunk. Fuck! Does it work? No, wage spirals. Oh, no. We need tax. Taxes more, please, taxes more. We don't pay it, but fuck it. Taxes more. And you sit there and you think, when did we lose not just common sense, but just IQ? Just the basic fundamentals. When did we lose that? Yeah, because when anything goes wrong economically, everybody goes, oh, the 70s. Humanity, civilized world, economies didn't suddenly fucking exist in the 70s. The 70s were an odd time where greed just fucking exploded, and Thatcher didn't help it in the fucking 80s either, because it was all greed driven then, you know, and a bit of that. And it existed before then. Economic stability governed, allowed Attlee to do what he did, allowed these houses to be built, the one I'm fucking sitting in. Because they were able to get more of the wealth generated by companies into the workers' pockets and tax it in income tax. 20% of 10 grand is 2 grand. 20% of 20 grand is 4 grand. Do you see how it works mathematically? Do you want me to cut the steak up for you and feed it to you? Get it into your pocket, you're going to pay it. You got tax on fucking everything. If they could tax fresh air, and they're fucking trying to with CO2, they literally are taxing fresh air, aren't they? Yeah, green taxes on CO2. They're taxing it. Their government have found a way to tax air. Fuck. You witnessed it. You lived through it last year. I don't. If you don't get it, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't figured it out, if you're still stuck in the fact that all economic ideology started in the 70s, it pisses me off. You cannot allow. Everybody always talks about free market capitalism like it's fucking brilliant. The market will set its own. It doesn't. It never fucking has done. It's always underestimating the other person's greed. You've got to govern it. And it doesn't really matter how you choose to do that. If you want social reform and socialism, if you want fucking capitalism with government-controlled traditional capitalism, it doesn't fucking matter. As long as it's not a dictatorship, it doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't matter. It does to you, because that's how they keep doing what they're doing. Divide and conquer. But it doesn't actually matter. If you can get more money coming into your pocket, you will spend more. You can afford the gas price rises. You can afford to put tyres on your car so you're not driving on slicks. You know, you can afford to get an EV car and the transition is quicker. Put a new boiler in and all that shit. You can afford to do it. And of course you're paying tax on your earnings. When you're buying all this shit, you're paying it. You're giving the government more tax. More tax that they can spend on society as a whole. Social, you know. But no, we've got to tax the wealthy more, even though they don't fucking pay it. You're just increasing tax on fuck all, really. Yeah, but you know, we tax Elon Musk on his 207 billion. You can't. He's proved it. He had to fucking sell some shares in order to pay the tax. And then he only paid the tax on the shares he fucking sold. Oh. It's just a spiral, isn't it? Because it's so ingrained in you now to choose a side that you can't see the wood for the trees. It's so ingrained in you. And that's why I'm neutral. That is why I'll always be neutral. Because you have to evolve society, not just petrol cars or internal combustion engine cars to EVs, but as a whole. Okay, let's put it somewhere else. Let's really fucking dumb this down. Let's say somebody turned around to you and said, right, you can make your own money, okay, and it will be seen as money. We will honour it as money by lending somebody a tenner and getting them to repay you plus a couple of percent. Yeah, so lend them a tenner, they repay you 12 quid. You made 2 quid. We'll honour that 2 quid actually existing. Right. Hold on 1 second. Filled up the SD card. Plus I have a cat that keeps coming in and it nicks all their food and scents everywhere. So it just pisses everywhere inside, so whenever I hear it coming I go chase it. But anyway, yeah. So there we go. Carry on with what I was thinking about. Okay, so you can generate your own money. Literally make your own money from nothing. Alright? You give £10 to somebody, they give you 12 quid back. Yeah? Well, at what point are you going to stop making your own money? There's no limit on what you can make or potentially what you can charge. So at what point are you going to stop making your own money? You're not, are you? You're just not. Yeah? And at what point are you going to stop holding this money that you've made? Well, you're not. You might lend it out to get it back, plus some, but you're not going to stop holding it. Well, that's the most dumbed down version of a debt-driven economy that you can possibly imagine. Really dumbed down. But you've got to be governed in that situation. You can't just allow it to do what it wants. And that's the next societal change. Bollocks with EVs, bollocks with all the other stuff. It's the next societal change. And at some point we have to figure this out. I mean, if you could halve the gap between the rich and the poor by increasing your wages so that the average wage in this country wasn't 30 grand, it was 50, 55 grand, right? Maybe even 60, but let's say 50. Yeah. And you adjusted the taxation rates accordingly so that the average person wasn't suddenly thrown into the 40%, it was still 20. Well, you're increasing per average worker, you're pretty much doubling the amount of tax that they pay. So things like Insulate Britain, where they want to close down society so that government helps fund poorer people to insulate their homes and shit like that. Would the government be able to afford to do it? Yeah. Would the transition with government-backed support, given the increase in coffers, be able to happen? Yeah. Would you have to shoulder so much of the burden? I'll get my words out, won't I? No. Yes, people always, higher taxation, it's not good. But if your government is less interested in dividing you and separating society to cling to power, then you end up with a more kind of bipartisan government, a coalition government style, like in Denmark, for example, where taxation is high. But the average person in Denmark has more of their income left over than you do. I mean, they can have savings with a realistic taxation rate of 60%. You have nothing left at the end of each month and are shitting it because your bills are going up 400 quid a year or 700 quid a year. Well, does our system actually work in that situation? No. So, it needs to evolve. And you need to stop living in the past. Yeah, you need to start thinking it. Some people say, oh, well, that's more socialist thinking than anything else. That's the problem. You're living in the past. You're living in the world divide and conquer. I believe in capitalism. I believe in generating profit and having wealth to have the things you want. I believe in a welfare system for people who are unfortunate. I do not believe that a government should subsidise multi-billion pound a year companies' wages. I don't believe that. I don't believe that an in-work benefit should exist. If you're in work, you are in work to earn money from that multinational company or that multi-million pound, multi-billion pound company to live on. And if they're not paying you enough to live on, well, the government helping you out is subsidising that company's wage bill. Why? Why? Doesn't make any sense, does it? It's private sector. The government rants on and rants on. The Conservative government rants on and rants on. Ooh, private sector is private sector. We need to allow the private sector to do what it does. And then it will, trickle down effect and all this other shit. And you sit there and you're like, but do you believe that's happening? Yeah. So why are you paying that person in work money to pay his rent? Because he's not earning enough in work. But you're saying if he's in full-time work, he's earning enough. But even if he's in part-time work, he should be earning enough. It don't work, does it? It's not about socialism or conservatism or fucking communism or fascism or anything else. They're just isms thrown at you so you pick a side and you stop thinking. Oh, well, we demand this, we demand that. But if you actually do decrease the gap between the rich and the poor by increasing average wages, you significantly increase the amount of tax revenue, and thus the government can actually provide you with the shit that you want or need. It's a weird theory, isn't it? It's a strange theory. Maybe it could work, I don't know. I mean, maybe wage competition exists, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it happened last year, but, is that proof enough? I don't know. But there you go. Anyway, hope you enjoyed these uploads. God's sake. This is a problem. When I don't upload, I just carry on, don't I? And some of you will agree, some of you won't agree. And so the division carries on and on and on and on and on. What the fuck ever. It doesn't matter. Alright, it doesn't matter. It's just a theoretical idea. A philosophical idea perhaps. A little rant for you. No need to get out your fucking pram. But it does make you think though, doesn't it? Historically, what's happened, what has been done, when it was done, how society operated. What was it? It was somebody at work not so long ago. He was like, why is it we keep trying to fix things that aren't broken? And I looked at him and I went, well, if we didn't do that, 99% of management would be out of a job. You can scale that up to anything you want, really. Government ministers, whatever, quangos, everything. You can scale it up to include anything. But anyway, thanks for watching all of this tripe. Hope you liked it. See you again at some point. God only knows when. Take care. Bye-bye.